Welcome to Operations and Supply Chain University. I'm Jerry Wright. This is lesson number 17, Setup Reduction, part of your Ops University Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt certification course. So setup reduction, or SMED, single minute exchange of die. Where this acronym came from was from Shigeo Shingo. He was a person who worked on stamping die changeover at Toyota. Over the 19 years that he worked on setup reduction, he came up with very efficient ways to change even very large pieces of equipment. Now, he didn't do this just because he thought it was a great idea. He developed these techniques out of necessity. Toyota, after World War II, didn't have enough working capital to buy new presses. They had to try to make the existing ones they already owned more flexible. So in the example that Dr. Shingo used, that we talk about single minute exchange of die, or where it originated, is he figured out a way to take the stamping section of a huge stamping press and put it on railroad tracks. So basically this many-ton stamping press could be rolled in and rolled out, and he had two of them. So one could be changed offline while the other one was running parts in the machine. Now, before he had done this improvement, it took over 8 hours to change the press from one, say, quarter panel to a hood or a door. When he did this change in putting this extra section on rollers, he basically was allowed the team to get setups done in less than 10 minutes. Can you imagine, from 8 hours to less than 10 minutes? And that's where SMED originated, less than 10 minutes, single minute exchange of die. And then they've done that over and over again at Toyota. Now they don't paint all the silver Toyotas on, Monday and then do all the red ones on Tuesday. They paint them in the order that they're going to be going on the truck to go off to the distribution centers or their next points. So they can do changeover on paint systems in literally seconds. So it's pretty neat. And there's a picture of Dr. Shigeo Shingo. He actually earned his doctorate from the University of Utah late in his life. And then the Shingo Prize for Excellence in Manufacturing is named after Dr. Shigeo Shingo. Interesting little fact there. So setup reduction, or SMED, can be applied to any setup process. Stamping dies, as we just mentioned, paint systems, machine changeover, office work. Think of accounting close as a process. How can we make that faster? The way that it goes is you have to make sure you have everything available. Scanners, tools, printers, lookup tables, material, documentation is at the work location. There's no looking or searching for it. Then we optimize and prepare the work area so that everything is very efficient. There's minimal movement and it's easy to do in a quick fashion. Then we train everyone on how to do this. And then we commit a setup reduction, or a SMED team, to work on the changeover or work on the setup reduction. Implement as many tools, checklists, forms, and guides as needed. And that's pretty much SMED as we know it. The key thing, though, and I like to point this out, is you have to measure, track, chart, and reinforce the time it takes to do whatever your process is. I've had students and classes and even companies I've worked with where they made the gains. They went from hours to minutes, and then over time they stopped measuring it. It got less important, and it started creeping back into the hours and not just minutes anymore. So it's important to keep track of those things. Here's a setup reduction example that I think everyone can identify, and I use this in my training. So here's a way to think about it. How long does a Formula One race car pit stop take? Some people say, oh, minutes. No, it's actually seconds. How many seconds? Let's watch. What I want to show you first is a 1950s Indianapolis race car Formula One pit stop. Now, there's some limits on this one. They're only allowed 4 people in the pit. They only change 2 tires, plus they have to put gas in the car. So this is Indianapolis 500 1950. Let's watch.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch.
If you watch this video, you notice that they're spending more time polishing the windshield and holding the car up and getting water for the driver than they are actually changing tires. They're still on tire number 1. Okay, tire 1's done, now to tire 2. You can tell they don't have air wrenches. They have a hammer with a nut they have to hammer on and hammer off. And again, polishing of the windshield. It sounds very ridiculous because the windshield's only about this big.
The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
67 seconds, so 1 minute and 7 seconds. Now let's look at a more current example. This is Ferrari. Now, a couple of changes. They can have as many people as they want. They don't have to do the fuel, but they're going to change all 4 tires. Watch. Here comes the car. Crazy, right? That was just under 3 seconds to change all 4 tires. Now, when I have people see this for the first time, they go, "Oh my gosh, that's incredible." Let's watch it again. So here it is again. Maybe just watch one team changing 1 tire. It's incredible. It really is. Let's look at another example. This is from DHL, the fastest pit stop award. Here we go. They have a timer in the upper right. 2.6 seconds. Let's see it again. What I'd like to mention is, do you think they practice this? Yeah, they do. Do you think they know what their best time is? Yes, they do. Imagine you had told the people in 1950 that you should be able to change all 4 tires in 3 seconds or less. They would have said, "What, can we use magic?" It's it seems very unrealistic to them, but they didn't have the tools, they didn't have the advancements that we see today. And then I like to point out is, why do you need the pit stop to be so fast? Why is just a few seconds matter? Well, if you think about in a Formula One race, the difference between first, second, and third and number of positions is literally, tenths of seconds, hundreds of seconds. So those pit stops matter. They need to be fast. It could be earning money or having no money at all. And so it's a big deal. Now, when I like to do setup reduction, I use something called a spaghetti diagram. This is a common thing to use. Here's an example where we're watching a setup reduction for a stamping press. And the gentleman with the blue shirt there, he's actually noting down where the person walks. Okay, so where are you going now? Now where are you going? And then we create this spaghetti diagram. This is an actual setup reduction process that I did at a facility in North Carolina. So here's the operator getting ready to get the press set up, and there's all the pen movements. So the pre-stage operators, they were called at this facility, walked nearly a mile in the before state, not only to get the information, get the work order, get the tools needed, check with quality. There's just a lot of movement in that particular pre-stage operator. Now the setup operator, this is the person running the press, they still had to walk roughly a quarter of a mile in the before state, and you can see their movement on the upper right. That's the operator running the stamping press. So that's a fair amount of movement. Now, we agreed as a team to come up with a better way to do this. So we created setup reduction, or SMED, standard work. Now here you can see this particular thing. We had external setup and internal setup. So this is basically our standard work. We had the pre-stage person do his or her standard work. The setup operator can't do any external work because they're actually, running the press. And then we had a material handling person who brought the forklift and the materials over. All these metals are very heavy. Then there was specific steps for each person, steps 1 through 10 for the pre-stage operator while the press was down, and steps 1 through 17 for the setup operator, the press operator, to do the changeover. And then for the material handler, steps 1 through 8. They got those done, and when they were finished, they could take off and help somebody else. So we said, let's try this. This was our first best estimate. Let's try this on the press. And so we did, and this is what the results we got. So the pre-stage operator only had to walk about a quarter mile, and that's largely to get everything ready, moving around the press. Their movement, which you can see here, looked mostly like what the setup operator had done in the previous section. Now the setup operator only had to walk about 400 feet. So this is dramatically improved operation. The setup time beforehand typically took several hours. We got it down to about 35, 40 minutes. And this was important because this particular press was constrained. It was a limitation for the business. We needed all the hours and time we could get. Now, setup reduction has very, very simple steps. You video record and list all the setup steps. Identify steps as internal or external. Then you want to convert any internal steps to external. So imagine in a pit stop, the internals when the race car is in the pit, externals before or after the pit stop. We don't care. So you wouldn't want the car to show up and they go, oh, you're here, let me go get the tires. That's not going to work. That's going to take too long. So once you get internal and external divided, then you want to reduce the time it takes to execute the internal steps. Organize and prepare, have a focused team, reduce the necessary tools. If you noticed in the Ferrari video, there's just, a handful of tools. There's a front and back lift, and then there's the air wrench, and they have quick release for the tires. That's it. It's very simple now. Construct a spaghetti diagram, as we said before. Note the movements. How can we make them shorter? How can we make them easier? Standardize the new setup process. Train everybody on it. Document and post the standard work as it's appropriate, and then track the setup times, realistically forever. You need to stay on top of those. Now, in the Indianapolis race car circuit, they're on those. They're trying to get down to, I think they're trying to work towards 1.5 seconds now. I believe the fastest time is down to less than 2 seconds to change all 4 tires. So pretty crazy, right? So setup reduction, the summary. Setup reduction reduces your waste. It reduces your non-value added and just downtime. Setup reduction can boost the capacity of a site or a plant. And setup reduction is also a key office improvement tool. You could use it to reduce how long it takes you to do your accounting period close, how long it takes to do batch processing and IT on your mainframe or servers. It could take less time to do a marketing or an R&D project setup or an execution. You could do it for a new project launch, maybe go live for an ERP or a software program update. All those are good ways to use setup reduction. Keep in mind, SMED or setup reduction requires very few tools. You need a video camera or a smartphone, someone to watch the video and ask questions, and then get the setup team working on it. It's really very straightforward. It's one of my favorite tools. Love using it. Now, for more on setup reduction, Shingo's book, A Revolution in Manufacturing, the SMED system, that's one of the originals. There's also Productivity Press. They created the quick changeover for operators, the SMED system, another good book you can pick up to read more about setup reduction or single-minute exchange of die. That's it for setup reduction. Remember to learn more, operationsuniversity.org and on YouTube at Operations and Supply Chain. Thank you.